It's a warm welcome from Grts and wherever you may be. This is the news at 8. First, our headlines. The Commonwealth team that observed the November 24th presidential election said the race was free, open, transparent, and devoid of violence and intimidation. Representatives of institutions and bodies with stake in education review the sector scorecard and pinpoint bottlenecks limiting greater progress. Thousands of Egyptians defy calls by activists to boycott the ongoing parliamentary elections, which set the transition to democracy in motion. And supporters of the Bashar al-Assad regime, angered by the Arab League suspensions of Syria, stormed the streets of the capital, Damascus. These and other stories coming ahead this hour. I am Famara Fofana. We thank you for joining us. The team of election observers dispatched by the Commonwealth to monitor the November 24th presidential election on Monday called on His Excellency the President, Sir Professor Alhaji Dr. Yahya Jammeh. This after giving the conduct of the race a clean bill of health. The team, led by Nigeria's former Foreign Minister, Professor Balagi Akniemi, noted that the presidential race took place in a free, open, and transparent manner, with no incidents of violence and intimidation. Our Abdul Njai reports.
The team arrived in the country well before the campaign period. They stayed on to watch the political maneuver at the start of the presidential race and have scrutinized every single detail of the process on polling day. And 5 days after the conduct of the election, the team has sounded its opinion on what it made out of the whole process.
We got there about 6:30 in the morning, and Mr. President, you should have seen the queue at 7 police stations in just around that compound. I mean, I thought if I was blaming him for getting me out of bed too early, I said, look, we will get that there'll be nobody there. When we got there and we saw this was a spontaneous outpouring of enthusiasm. We didn't see any government officials putting pressure on anybody, none whatsoever. They queued patiently. They showed enthusiasm. Mr. President, I think you should ask the men why there were more women on the queue. I asked the women, why were they more on the queue than the men? And the women said, because they were enthusiastic about the experiment. So my brother, the foreign minister, have been teasing him since then that, you know, more women turned up to vote at the election. It was very peaceful, no violence. And, Mr. President, you must take credit for this.
The visit followed the publication of the Commonwealth Team of Election Observers preliminary report, which is already in circulation. At the State House, they underscored, among other things, the need for other African countries to emulate the Gambia's electoral system and the civil language, particularly that of President Jammeh, in calls for peaceful conduct of the election.
We noted from the beginning the tone with which you set the entire environment. A very statesman-like posture. We are happy the opposition reciprocated by also making it a campaign of issues and not a... But as father of the nation, you set the tone. The others just responded. And we will reflect this, of course, in our own report, but you deserve congratulations for that. The way and manner in which the officials conducted the elections showed a full commitment to integrity. I've observed elections in several parts of Africa, and while I'm not here to condemn anybody, at least I could point to one experiment where I have absolutely no criticism of the actual conduct of the elections. The officials let us know that there was nothing to hide. Once we showed our label as international observers, we were allowed to observe everything. We noticed the cooperation among the party agents. You will have thought you were dealing with members of the same family. They were actually helping each other out. We were impressed with that. The conduct of the security forces, impeccable.
In an election entirely financed by government, according to the observer team, it was rather remarkable that the process went as it did. The suggestions were for the use of the president's unlimited popularity and mandate which appealed to every Gambian to broaden the democratic space, especially with regards to the role of journalists in nation building. For the president, it is only through elections one can measure progress, and it was important to him in spite of the challenges that the polls took place.
This is a very important aspect as far as I am concerned, because contrary to what some people believe, a president is just a title, because one day we will appear, even if you are a king, we will be judged by a super king that nobody can question, and that is the hereafter, where life is longer than here, and I'm very careful of that. I want to make sure that whatever I do is endorsed. I do it on behalf of the Gambian people. And how would you know that you have the mandate of the Gambian people? By asking them, and that is, elections are very important. This election was entirely financed by government. To my surprise, the IEC, when they came with a huge budget, I told them, look, we all know that there are economic crises, and maybe knock at the doors of some people that have always tried to give you something, so that, because for the government to really finance all this, with all this gloomy financial situation, it's a big risk. He went around and came back and said, well, we have nothing. So what do we do? I told him, well, even if you have to eat grass, there would be elections. We will do our best. So since you know that it's not possible from elsewhere, we will do our best, but don't expect that we can give you everything that you need. But we will do our best for you to make sure that the elections are conducted. We facilitate everything that is possible.
On account of what transpired during the First Republic, where government was a referee in polls it contested, it is now only fair to say government has gone a long way in its democratization process. We may have our shortcomings, but we are doing our best, the president told the delegation.
I think my colleagues should learn from what we are doing here. It was not my intention to go out to campaign, and also when I went out, all I have to tell them was to thank the people and tell them to avoid violence. Because it is easier to destroy than to build. And when you destroy, it takes you 100 years backwards before you can get to the level where we don't want to be going back and forth. We want to move forward from there. That elections, campaign period is not a time to intimidate people. Because if you intimidate me, I'll not vote for you, because where I vote, you will not be there. I went with my wife to vote, but we couldn't go together, because the law says we only go as an individual. In fact, when we came out, when I came out, and then my wife went to vote and came back, I said, did you vote? She said, yes. And then one of the journalists said, whom did she vote for? I said, well, I think she voted for me. Then the journalist said, how are you, sir? I said, I'm sorry, because she's my wife. I don't expect her. And I said, I don't expect her to vote for somebody's husband. Yes, and then they laughed. But what I want to assure you is that some of these constraints that were a result of financial constraints, they would have, if we had more resources like before, they would have taken care of a lot of this.
With regards to the issue of youth and women empowerment, President Jammeh maintained this section of the population will continue to be catered for in terms of employment or in the provision of the necessary life skills for their survival. It was an open